We are finally starting renovations in our dining room today. About 2 years ago, we bought a 35-acre farm and a house. The earliest date that we have been able to find in the house is written underneath wallpaper in our living room, and it is dated 1905. Other than that, there is no record of this house before the 1950s, and you can't make heads or tails out of the deeds, so we just kind of go from 1905 as being the date this house was built, since it's the earliest date that we've been able to find. The house sat empty for 5 years before we bought it, and it was used as a party house, so a lot of people had broken into it and vandalized it. When we bought the house, there were 5 windows busted out, and 2 of them were in the upstairs bedroom above this dining room, and it had been like that for at least 5 years that we know of. So the floors up there were ruined, and also it caused mold in the plaster behind on the insulation and running down the plaster, if that makes sense. Our original plan was to keep everything in this house as original as possible, and that is still our goal, especially in the other rooms. But the further we kept going in this room, we just kept uncovering more issues and reasons that we could not keep everything. So the floors are really the only thing that we can keep in this room. We have to sand them down, of course. All of these clips that I'm showing were from before we even moved into the house. This was probably about 2 weeks after we bought the house, and we were trying to clean out all the trash in here and move out all the carpet and just to get down to the base so we could see what we were working with. And we loved the floors, but all of the old footage that I have is going to be in this format just because I was not planning on starting a YouTube channel, so I don't have any horizontal footage filmed, but that is why this is all going to be vertical footage. So I did keep the pieces of trim that we got off that were whole in here because some of them did end up busting, but for the most part we kept everything that we could, and those will be used as replacement pieces in the rest of the house. But it just didn't add up or make sense to try and keep that trim in here, just because by the time we filled all the nail holes, it would look really, really bad in my opinion, just because they put it up with square nails and round nails. I'm not really sure why. But in the rest of the house, our goal is to not have to remove any of the trim from the wall or the plaster, just because once you start removing it, you cause more issues as you go. Because once we removed the baseboards, it loosened the plaster from the laths, and it just continued creating problems. But we knew the plaster in here had to come down anyways, so we weren't too concerned about that. But in the rest of the house, we do plan on keeping the plaster and original trim, and we will just peel the paint in place instead of having to remove the baseboards like we did in here. So if you have followed along since the very beginning, and you would probably have seen it over on my Instagram, if I can find clips, I will try and insert them throughout this video. But this house was just completely trashed when we bought it, and we think it's from renters leaving their belongings behind, and then over the years of people breaking in and stealing stuff and just vandalizing the house, using it as a party house. Before the house sat empty, we do know that sometime in the early 2000s, the house was renovated a little bit. On the ceilings, they covered up a lot of issues, so we actually tore that down whenever we first bought the house, within the first month or two that we bought the house, just because we saw the issues it was causing. They had hung sheetrock over top of the existing plaster, and rodents and mice and snakes had gotten in between the 2 layers, and there was tons of feces and just bugs in there, so we had to get that tore out. But also where the windows were busted out, the ceiling was already completely molded, and that got tore out whenever we first moved in because we weren't comfortable living in the house with mold that we could see, so we tore it all out. But now we have found that the walls are actually molded in here too, on the side where you see the 2 windows. So that is why we had to actually remove the laths and plaster, just because we wanted to remove any mold issues. By the time we tore down the ceiling, I am pretty sure that we had started a YouTube channel by then. So if I can find that video, I will link it down below for you guys. It's kind of hard to keep all the videos and where they're at in place because some of them are over on my Instagram, and then some are on TikTok, and then here on YouTube. So it's hard to remember when I started my channel and what is all on this YouTube channel and what's not. We do plan on this being our forever house, so we're not just trying to make this a quick flip, and that's why we put so much time in between each renovation, because we want this to be exactly what we want, and we're just not in it for the cost effectiveness. We want this to be our dream house at the end of the day, and so as we go, we have to take care of the serious issues, and that being any mold or water issues, and then also the lap siding is causing us so many issues right now. So if you've watched my videos for a while, then you know that earlier this year our plan was to completely redo the outside of the house, and that just did not happen. Financially, we just did not have the money to do it at the time, so instead of doing the complete outside, we're just starting and doing it from the inside in here in the dining room, just because we knew that we were going to be tearing out this plaster anyways, so we could insulate it from the inside. Our goal is to still remove that lap siding and put new siding on the outside of the house as soon as possible, but it's just not going to happen for a while, and mostly because I put it off, because I was so gung-ho about trying to restore this house back to what it was, and I wanted to stick with the lap siding, but that is just not going to happen. Realistically, our house, we were at church and an old man asked us if we had had any trouble staying warm, and he said that everybody that has lived here before us had really struggled to stay warm, and we were telling him all the issues that we were having. And he said he has the same issue in his house, which is built with lap siding. It's just a really common problem, but it's not a good feeling to know that your house is known in your town for pretty much freezing people to death in the wintertime and not being able to stay warm. So ultimately, we are going to go with a different siding than lap siding. I know a lot of people are going to be upset about that, but it's just what we have to do for us. We live on top of a hill with no trees, and we do plan on creating like wind blocks with trees, but that is going to take years for the trees to even grow tall enough to be an efficient wind block. So until then, we have got to get a new siding, and we're not sure what we're going to go with, but it cannot be vinyl. Our contractor told us that he will not put vinyl on our house because it will not stay on. And when we go to put on a new roof as well as new siding, we will be hiring that done, just because we cannot safely do that ourselves. Our house is incredibly tall and we do not have the scaffolding for that or ladders. So we have one tall ladder that can reach the top, but there is no way to safely get on our roof without creating some kind of hang off so that you can hang on the side of the house. And we just do not feel comfortable doing that ourselves. So we really need a contractor. Since we've lived here for about 2 years now, we finally have the weather patterns down, and we have noticed that around September all the way till about April, we have a constant wind here, and it will quite literally freeze you to death. My entire family, every time they come over, it can be 50 degrees, but they still bring coveralls and overalls to wear because it is that cold. You cannot stand to be outside, and it really puts an effect on our house, just because we burn through so much wood in our outdoor wood furnace, and it is a commercial grade one, which usually you see those in large stores, and the BTU is rated for well above the square footage of our house, so we should have no complications heating this house. But we have the past 2 years, and we're lucky if we can get the house to stay above 68 degrees. And typically, if the wind blows, sometimes it will get down to the 50s, and we just kind of have to plug in electric heaters and make the best of it. So we usually wear a lot of clothes inside, but we just keep telling ourselves that we won't have to do that for much longer. We are actually going to be installing a temporary wood stove in our living room this year, and that is just going to help us get through the winter, just because last year we had such a bad winter. Our heat exchanger actually went out, and we lost a ton of our food. We lost all of our paint, stain, varnishes, everything like that. So it was very, very costly whenever that happened. So we are trying to put implications in place so that that does not happen again. So we're hoping that on our coldest days, we can have the inside stove going as well as the outside wood furnace going. So it'll be a lot of wood we're burning, but we're hoping it will help save us some money in the long run and not have to lose all of the things that we have worked so hard for. I made the mistake of leaving my camera set up the entire time that we were tearing down the laths and plaster, so the footage was not usable because it was covered in dust. So luckily I took these clips on my phone, but the dining room is completely down to the bare studs and we are ready to insulate and hang drywall, but it feels good to finally be making some renovation progress.